Man, I tell you what, I love this. The heat in the summertime. I think people are sad that the spring's moved on, but who loves like the heat? I know there's some people that are like, that's right, you live in Florida. I just love it. You walk outside in the morning. You walk out and it's a little bit balmy. I mean, if you love Florida, there's something you dig about that. You can smell grass clippings. It's summertime, right? But man, I love this series. We're back in Psalms again. Somebody asked me the question the other day, like, why we did Psalms last summer? Well, there's 150 of them, so we got a few more to cover. But the series and the framing is a little different. In this series, it's playlists, songs, Psalms, right, from the heart. But I was thinking about this idea of playlist, and for me, I didn't grow up with playlists. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. What was the 70s and 80s version of the playlist? Anybody? Mixtape, baby. In the mixtape, you can't draw on a playlist. You could draw on your mixtape. You could put a little character and a little Star Wars man or whatever you wanted to put on there before you handed it to that special someone that you thought were going to grab their attention, or they were going on vacation for the summer and you were hoping they wouldn't meet, another guy. So you'd be like, hey, think about me. And you'd hand them the mixtape. And they were just as cheesy back then as a playlist is now that you send to somebody. But I remember the making mixtapes. I remember getting the dual cassette. Anybody remember that? I had a Fisher dual cassette I got for Christmas. I was like, dude, I'm going to make some sweet mixtapes. It's going to be awesome. I don't know why I became, what's his name? Napoleon Dynamite. You got it. Instantaneously. It just happened. Mixtape, Napoleon Dynamite. It all sounds like should go together. But I remember making a mixtape. There's one that I remember specifically, and it ended with a song that it would. You ever have those songs that transport you somewhere? Like you're riding in the car. I mean, my kids know that I do this. Like we ride in the car, and then me and my wife are kind of getting into the groove, and we're like, remember where we were? Yeah, I remember. And the kids are like, oh, very upset about it. But I remember on this mixtape, it ended with. Summer Nights, Van Halen, 5150. It was actually Van Hagar because they're no longer David Lee Roth. Everybody in here is looking at me like, Van Halen, the pastor, listened to Van Halen? Yes, I did. And if that's a problem, then I don't know what to do for you. But it just transported me somewhere. Summer Nights and my radio. It's all we need, baby. Don't you know? I mean, I would just get there, and it would immediately, I'd be in St. Teresa, which is right around Alligator Point in the Forgotten Coast of the Gulf Coast. And it was, they call that portion of the Gulf Coast the Forgotten Coast. It really is. I mean, it is. People forgot about it because it is like redneck, and it's awesome. I love going there, but it's still, to this day, undeveloped, and there's not a ton there. And the people that have beach houses there are super stoked. But they have 3 teeth. And it's awesome. But it's awesome. You go there. I remember fires on the beach, going to my buddy's beach house and hanging out. It just transports you there. And mixtapes, playlists, those kind of things, they're somebody even said it this morning, there's so many things that we put in place to guide our own heart. We're trying to move, when we're in a bad mood, we're trying to lift the mood. When we're doing certain things, we're trying to push our heart, our soul, and our mind in a particular direction with the things that we do, the things that we grab a hold of. And playlists are kind of that way. In fact, I was looking and doing some research on Spotify, and their staff, the Spotify development staff, did a list a few years back of 250 of the best named playlists. Now, there's a lot that I cannot say here in church, but some of them were interesting to me and funny because it really is that leading of the heart. One of them was dance to these if you want to get fired. That was one playlist. There is no angry way to say bubbles. I'm guessing that's like a levity play, and there is. Austin reminded me after the first gathering, he said, bubbles. There is an angry way to say bubbles. Didn't work. I don't even know. Songs that make me question my life. That's a nice playlist name. You can almost, you can get there. If you listen, you'll probably get it on the way home. Songs that make me, yes. A list of songs that I love that you probably hate. You know those songs, right? I mean, the ones that you don't want to tell everybody that you love. I mean, it's got a little T Swift in there, a little Justin Bieber, but you don't want to tell anybody that there's Katy Perry on your playlist. And you're like, but she's there, right? Criminally overlooked tracks. I mean, you can see the guy that wrote that one. He's the guy that's cooler than you. This senorita needs a margarita. I know what that's the Friday playlist. This was one of my favorite, Tap to Feel Despair. I mean, that is so emo. I mean, that is right there in that world. I mean, you can see that guy. He's got eyeliner. It's awesome. This one's the classic breakup playlist. No More of You. I mean, it's very to the point. But you can see just even by the names that it is, like a playlist is in place to speak something over you. The collection of the playlist is usually a theme that's trying to get you out of something. And that's interesting about certain songs, certain playlists, is that the reason we love them, like in a breakup season or in the valley kind of season, is because it tells us, hey, there's somebody that wrote this song. There's other human beings that connected this song. I'm not the only one going through this. I'm not the only one that's traveled down this road. And one of the things about the Psalms, specifically the Psalms of David, not that the Psalms of Asaph or some of the other authors of the Psalms are bad, but we know the life of David so well, we can almost picture the seasons of life. And some of the Psalms that he wrote, we do know what season of his life he wrote them, what failure he was in, what success he was in. And we can read the Psalms, and the power in the Psalms many times is to see this is very human. We know that these things happen to real people. They happen to David. They happen to the people that wrote these Psalms. These are things that happen to me. We connect with them. And the beautiful thing about digging in to something like the Psalms is it does help lead our heart, but it leads us in a better way. Because a lot of us have had the wrong playlists playing in our lives. We've got a lot of different things that come at us from so many different directions that take that space and create themes subconsciously for us that the enemy wants us to hear. Like the songs of the past, the playlist of the past, like you're not good enough. Or the words maybe spoken over you by a parent that created something in you. That maybe are still driving you today to be successful because your father never told you were good enough or never even said anything to you. Those are the types of playlists that the enemy likes us to experience. The songs of rejection, the songs of failure, the songs of fear, the songs of wasted time. Those are the things that we experience on planet Earth. And when our eyes and when our heart is down here, we grab towards anything that will try to sing a different tune or play a different song over our life or to hear a different voice. And as we dig into the Psalms, we're going to allow it to be a playlist. Instead of a 1,000 other voices that are pulling us in 1,000 different directions, it's going to be one voice from the one person that matters, God himself. And that's what's beautiful about the Word of God. So with that, what I want to do is we're going to stand up and we're going to go through all of Psalm 8 together. And we're going to read it. You're not going to just read it on the screen. I'm not just going to be the reader. We're all going to be the readers. People are like, it's 11:15. I'm supposed to stand up. Like 9, I'm telling you, they were like, bing. I don't know how many cups of coffee they had, but they were ready to read. All right, so Psalm 8. You with me? Yes. All right, here we go. Lord, our Lord, you're in it with me. How majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them. You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands and put everything under their feet, all flocks and herds and the animals of the wild, the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea, all that swim the paths of the seas. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You may be seated. Thanks be to God for the beauty and the power of his word. It's nice to read that together. It's actually poetry. You see, the beginning and the end are capped with, Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. And that's kind of a powerful even thought. It's called an inclusio, which is, it's kind of this poetic term to say, here's the one statement that we're going to kind of wrap this entire piece of poetry or this entire song in. And the first statement is just to make the statement. And the second statement is really to say, see, I told you, based on what's said in the middle. Like, hey, I'm going to say this thing, and then I'm going to explain a little bit what I mean about how majestic God is. And at the end, it's like, hey, now we can all see how majestic God really is. It's one of the powerful ways that the poetry is written by the psalmist David. So what we're going to do as we approach each psalm, or at least this week, we're going to break it down into tracks because we're making a playlist, right? See, I'm getting too creative now. It's amazing. We're going to break it down into tracks, and we're going to look at 3 tracks today that we want God to sing over our lives. We want God to say over our lives, something to really readjust our heart, readjust our mind, and readjust our soul away from the 1,000 voices and really aligned with the one voice that matters, okay? So track number 1, and again, the names, you can just bear with them because it's me trying to be creative. Track number 1, my dad is bigger than your dad. In that first verse, Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. He says, you have set your glory in the heavens. And immediately what's happening there, and we have to keep in mind that David is writing the psalm, is that he's looking up, that he's seeing something that's capturing his heart. There's an awe and amazement in the creation. There is a throwback in Psalm 8 to Genesis. Every commentary that you read on Psalm 8 really takes us back to the moment in which God breathed out creation, that he spoke it into existence, the sun, the moon, the stars, the things that he set in place. David he's taken aback, he's swept away with how powerful his dad is, how powerful his heavenly Father is. And you have to remember that David spent a lot of time on his back as a shepherd in the field at night. But I was thinking about this idea of my dad is bigger than your dad and how we traverse that idea of parents. Now, I mean, granted, not everybody in the room has had a great dad. In fact, I even said just a moment ago that many of the things that we need actually redeemed in our lives are the way that maybe you were treated as a child. Maybe it's the way that you had experienced childhood growing up. Maybe it's the things that your father never said that he should have said. But there's many people in here that have this picture of their dad and have great dads. And there's seasons in our lives where we see them in a certain way. When we're little, I've said this many times in here, we see our parents like they're superstars. Or we see our dad, specifically when you're a son, you're looking at your dad like he can do anything. And then you become a teenager and he embarrasses you. And that's immediately what transitions at age 12. I don't know what it is, what hormone gets released at that point where all of a sudden you're cool and then you're not cool. But it does happen. But there's this season in which kids, and even as you become adults, where there's something that, you know, when you think about your parents, it gets lost. It gets kind of shuffled to the side, and we don't even think about it. Well, I was doing just, you know how you get in the vortex on the internet, like you start looking, and you know you're looking up a news article. Next thing you know, you're like looking at flying lawnmowers, and you don't know why. It was one of those days. And I found this article where somebody had collected all of these pictures and photos and stories from people that were my age that discovered things about their fathers that they didn't know. And the title of the article was like, you know, didn't realize that my dad was cooler than me. And it was just a whole, you know, collection of really cool pictures. Well, I just grabbed a few of them because I thought they were awesome. This is the first one. I just think this is so cool. My dad in Saudi Arabia in the 70s, working as a U.S. military contractor, diving in the Red Sea. I don't know. When you pull that one out of the old, you know, album, you realize, especially with that stash, that your dad is cooler than you. I mean, and that dude's a good-looking dude. I mean, it's awesome. Next one's pretty awesome. Check this out. This person did not know that their dad was in Surfer magazine, because they were born late. They were like a oopsie baby, and they came later on down the line, and dad was old and just stuffed the magazine somewhere. Never was kind of a chance thing. I mean, I would have told my children every day that I was in Surfer magazine, right? I mean, it definitely would have happened. Now, this one is special and near and dear to my heart as a redneck. I mean, look at this. Let's just leave that there for a moment. Let's drink it in. My dad being infinitely cooler than I'll ever be, 1980. I mean, there's so many things about that we could do a sermon about that picture. Just look at his face. He's so not even struck by the fact that he's doing it. Like Austin in between the gatherings, he's like, I'd be like, like, woo, he's just like, this is what we do here on my property with my extra long hood on my extraordinarily long car from the 70s. I don't know. That is just cool. Like if you found that of your dad, you'd be like, my dad is absolutely off the charts. It was kind of like the rattling of the cage for all these kids. It was a bunch of them. I might post the link to it because all of them are talking about their parent going, we didn't realize how cool he was. And we realized in an instant that our dad did things that we wish we could do, that we wish we could be a part of. And what I love about what's happening here is David is proclaiming in Psalm 8, he's like, my dad is awesome. I'm looking up and I'm maybe on the day in and the day out, we forget. And here's the reality for you and me, is we forget. Like for us, our heart, our mind, especially our eyes, finds its way down here. Like this is where we look. This is where we're connected. These are the things, we're into a lot of the smallness of the world. And we get distracted by it. Like it is the thing that pulls us in. And David spent a lot of his time in alone, out in the field at night as a shepherd, but also on his back looking up at the expanse of the universe and had a view that was incredible. Like out in the middle, when we leave to get out of the city to get as far away from streetlights as we can, we have to drive. They didn't have streetlights. So he just would lay on his back and he would look up and he would see the Milky Way. And he would be blown away that God created those things. He set the sun, the moon, the stars in place. Oh, how majestic is your name in all the earth. And for us, we spend a large portion of our time being with our eyes here, right? Experiencing the world, from a horizontal level. I was at Jekyll Island Brewing, just checking out the new restaurant here. And Beth and I were outside. The weather was beautiful. We were on the rooftop there. And I'm looking, you can see a lot of the Atlantic Ocean from the corner that we were at. We're up there. I'm just kind of checking. I like to people watch, check people out. And there was an entire table of people. And I looked over, and it wasn't me being judgmental, but I did judge them. Every single person at the table was doing what? Looking at their phone. You knew, because you look at your phone. And, looking at the phone. And again, we do it. We're in that culture, but they were all dialed into their phone. And I'm thinking the sky has been painted pink and blue. We can see the ocean. We can drink in the fact that we live here in Jacksonville Beach, and it's an amazing place, and allow that to kind of change the way that we think. In fact, I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. I was telling Beth this as I was writing this talk. I was like, I don't know what's happened over the last few years. I get up in the morning. I go through my routine when I wake up, get my coffee, and I used to sit down and I flip on the news. But now I walk straight out the back door and I just go outside. Like I don't stop. And my kids make fun of me because they're like, Dad, you're just looking at your grass. It's what you're doing. And I go by the kitchen and just wave, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's out there pulling weeds and at 6 a.m. But part of it is, it's like, I love that just the side, like, it's been one of those times where I pray and I have this gratitude as I look at my yard. Yes, I do feel that. But I think about where God's placed me in life, where I am. And in the day in, day out, it can be a grind, even living where people vacation. But there's those moments where we have to stop and go, and not just looking at the creation, not just looking at the ocean, not just looking at where we live, but allowing our heart to roll up and know that there's a creator that put me here. There's a creator that made all these things and has allowed me, because of his grace, to experience him. I don't know why. I don't deserve it. I didn't earn it, but he He's put me here and given it to me, and I just need to look up and say thank you. And that's the essence of Romans chapter 1, isn't it? That people have forgotten to do that. That's what it says in Romans 1, that they've forgotten that creation, the things that have been created were created by someone, namely the God of the universe. And they've been enamored by the created things rather than what? The Creator. And therein lies the problem. But David didn't have an awe problem. He didn't have a fear problem, which many of us have. And Paul Tripp puts it this way. I think it's an interesting take on the idea of looking up. It is only the fear of something greater that disarms the fear of something lesser. What he's talking about there is we should have a reverent fear that's vertical. But instead, we have a horizontal fear of everything that's around us. Fear of other human beings, fear of not getting the approval that we want, fear of our, what's the future look like with our, with our job, with our health. We have all of these things, and they're real things. There's real things that are in front of us. But for somebody like David, he allowed the way that he experienced life, he looked up. And he saw that his God is the one that can save. His God, no matter what he faced, his God was the one that breathed out the stars, could change everything. I mean, I love that we have evidence of it. If you look at 1 Samuel chapter 17, you have one of the most epic stories in all of the Bible. You have David and Goliath. David was a shrimp. He was the guy that wasn't even in the lineup when they went to pick a king from all of his brothers. Lined all the brothers up, and they left David out. He's playing his harp somewhere, I guess. We're not going to put him up there. These are warriors. He plays his harp and tends the sheep. But what they didn't know is that David put all of his trust in God, and that he had killed a lion and a bear with his bare hands. So you can't mess with him. You can make fun of him and his harp, but dude killed a bear. I mean, he was the real deal. And all of a sudden, the Israelites are under siege by the Philistines, and these massive human beings from Gath, these giants, were coming against the Israelites. One in particular, his name was Goliath. And he would come out on the field every day and shout taunts, cuss at everybody, make fun of the Israelites, make fun of God, and say, "Send me your best, and we will go to war. And whoever wins it all." And he would come out every day. And the Israelites had retreated for 40 days. They had backed off because they had They had a horizontal fear problem. But David, who vertically understood that my reverent fear goes in one direction, he rolls up on the scene to just bring lunch to his brothers. He's like, "What's going on?" And everybody's like, "Man, you should see this huge dude. He's 9 feet tall. He's got a spear. The tip of his spear is 15 pounds. He is the scariest person we've ever seen. We've been retreating for 40 days and commiserate and trying to figure out what to do." And David's like, "Well, I know exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to go out there and we're going to defeat the giant. But I'm not going to do it. God's going to do it." And he goes to Saul and tells him, and Saul's like, "Yeah, great. Go for it. You can do this." And he says, "Well, look, God gave me the hand of the paw of the lion, paw of the bear. He'll give me the hand of this Philistine." And he goes out there with a shepherd's sling, donks the guy on the head under the power of God. Can you imagine this scene? Goliath, giant, falls. And not only that, David walks up to him. And he had told him face to face as Goliath's making fun of him when he rolls out there. Goliath's like, "Are you kidding me? You're going to send this kid out here?" And what's David's response? He says, "Guess what? The birds are going to eat your carcass today." I mean, that is a crazy, this isn't the Jesus Storybook Bible version. This is the actual version. In the actual version, Goliath falls like a sack of potatoes after getting hit in the head with a rock from David. And David walks over there, pulls out Goliath's sword. I mean, you talk about like throwing some shame on the Philistines. Grabs Goliath's massive melon, cuts his head off, and holds it up to the Philistines. Smiles and says, "This is how this is going down." And then he brings it back to Jerusalem. Brings the head with him. He's like, "We're going to tote this back home." He goes home. Because David didn't fear what was happening horizontally. He feared God and God alone. He knew that that's where the power came from. A.W. Tozer says this, and I'll leave this with you with track number 1. Is your view of God worthy of who the heavens say he is? Is that the way that you view God? Because it can readjust your heart and readjust your mind. And for me, I think I need to find more opportunity to separate myself from what's happening around me, find myself in those positions, in those places where I look up and where I can get alone and away from everything and be quiet with the Lord and just thank Him. Thank Him for who He is, what He's created, where He's placed me, that He is with me, that He won't forsake me, that He'll walk with me through the valley of the shadow of death, and that He's sufficient. Second track, I am not, but I know I am. Stole that title from a book that I read a long time ago by Louis Giglio, and the essence of it comes from a story where Moses approaches the burning bush late in life, and he's explaining to God that he's not worthy, that there's no way that he can do the things that God's asking him to, and God had referred to himself as the I am. He is it. When you're thinking about, all of existence, God referred to himself as I am, and the play on words is I am not, but I know I am, because God said, don't worry to Moses when he charged him with going to lead 2 million Israelites out of 400 years of bondage. He said, don't worry, I'm going to be with you. And so when you read this passage, that kind of gets us into that place of framing what's happening here, because God uses the weakest. And in verse 2 it says, through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. Now, when you first read this, you're like, this seems misplaced. He's talking about how majestic is your name in all the earth, setting the sun, the moon, the stars in place. Who is man that you're mindful of him? The son of man that you care for him. And then kind of stuck in there before that is through the praise of children and infants. What's this babbling babies stuff? Like, praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. Well, if you read about this passage and you know what's happening structurally around the Psalms, the psalmist is communicating something. The first chunk of Psalms in this first book of Psalms, there's 5 Psalm books in the book of Psalms. In these first chunk of Psalms, it's describing the insufficiency of David, that David has found himself as a weak human being, as somebody that needs God and is insufficient. So that's Psalm 3 through 7. And then you see Psalm 8's kind of tucked in here. And then Psalm 9 through 14 is about the people of God being weak and insufficient. And then in Psalm 8, there is a description here to say, hey, God will use the weakest to bring praise to himself. God will use the weakest to create a fortress and a stronghold. And it actually is a theme that you see that exists throughout all of Scripture. I mean, we start with Abraham. Abraham was not plucked from a God-fearing family, but a pagan family. And then everything that God wanted him to do was nearly impossible because Abraham got to be 100 years old and he was supposed to have descendants that numbered, the stars in the sky. Abraham's like, well, how's this going to happen? God uses the weakest of weak. Goes on to Moses. He was on the downside of life. He was 80 years old. He was shy. He had a stuttering problem. And God says, yeah, we're going to use you to be the mouthpiece of the Israelites to go to Pharaoh to say, let my people go, who had been in bondage for 400 years. Gideon was the weakest from the weakest family. And God said, I'm going to use you in this small group of men. You're going to have 300 people are going to defeat 30,000. You see the theme here? God is using the weakest things to offset his glory. He's like, I don't need somebody that thinks that they're sufficient. I don't need somebody that puffs their chest out and thinks that they're strong. God's like, there's no comparison between who God is and who humans are. And that's why this passage goes on to say, you have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. It's almost just like, why would you even do this? Why wouldn't angels be in charge of the earth? You've taken the people that you formed out of the dust of the ground. You breathed stars into existence. You spoke those into existence, and you formed man out of the dust of the ground, and yet you rule with them. You made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet. The psalmist is saying, this doesn't make sense. You use the weak things, and babies are the weakest, arguably in the animal kingdom. When a baby is born, a human child, squirrels, when they're born, they're very soon after that, they're running up trees. Lizards, same thing. Babies, they're just jelly necking for a long time. Like they are, think about how soft and squishy I mean, they cannot defend themselves. I mean, you do not leave a baby outside for long without supervision or ever, right? I mean, never. Why? Because they're weak. It's a picture that David is presenting here. Like he's amazed and he feels privileged. He knows how weak he is. Psalm 3-7, it's almost a description of David understanding. I didn't deserve to be the one that was able to kill a lion. I can't take pride in that, or kill the bear, or kill Goliath, or do the things, or become the king over all of Israel. Yet here I am. God has placed me here. It is because of God and not me. It was time and time again. Same thing happened with John the Baptist. John the Baptist had to say, hey, I am not the light, but the light's coming. They were asking, what's happening? You were baptizing tons of people, and now all of a sudden your baptism numbers are dropping, and this other guy over here's baptism numbers are growing. Well, John knew. It's not about me. I am here. I am the one that's making a path. I'm blazing a trail for the one that can save the world. And David understood. This was that God would use the weak. You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. But the problem that exists on planet Earth started in Genesis chapter 3, then the serpent. Because human beings started to think, what? Oh, I can do this on my own. I mean, that's the essence of what happens in the garden when they eat the apple. The enemy says, hey, you can be gods. Don't listen to God. You don't need him. And we were nothing without God. Our relationship with God, the symbiotic relationship of Adam and Eve and God and the rest of the Trinity was the thing that made the Garden of Eden beautiful. And then sin enters, rebellion enters, and there's insufficient people who think that they're sufficient. And then you and I, and we still do it today, we think that is what we want most. We want to survive on our own. We want to do it ourselves. We want to figure out how to dig ourselves out of the hole, how to be successful, how to make people like us. And we've gotten pretty good at it. But every single one of us knows, even if you don't know Jesus and none of this stuff really matters to you, all of us end up in a similar place where we end up brokenhearted. We end up abandoned. We end up not being liked by the people that we want to like us. It's part of who we are. There's a reason that I was doing some research on playlists and the songs that people connect with. And I think it's always good to do. Don't be so disconnected from the things that people do on planet Earth. Like if you're super Christian, you're like, I don't really have Spotify. I just listen to worship music that I burn on CDs. You should get into the technology and see a little bit, like see what's happening out there. I like to see what people are listening to. That's an interesting thing to me, human behavior. What are the most streamed songs on the planet? And so I went and did some research, like to look up, like what are people listening? Because when you know an entire collection of human beings is all listening to the same thing, then we're all struggling with the same thing. What are those things speaking over? Like what is that? How does that inform me? Especially as a pastor, as a Christian, as a human being. What is it that's pulling our heart? And I found this song. Anybody know Louis Capaldi? Someone You Loved? Anybody? I love this song. It's great. He says, I'm going under, and this time I fear there's no one to save me. I mean, we've all been in that place, right? I mean, this could be a psalm. I mean, listen to it and think about the Psalms of David talking about flooding his bed with tears all day long. Where are you, God? Listen to this voice. He says, this is all or nothing really got a way of driving me crazy. I need somebody to heal, need somebody to know, somebody to have, somebody to hold. I know somebody's singing it in their head right now. It's easy to say, but it's never the same. I guess I kind of like the way you numbed all the pain. Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here. I mean, you hear David just crying out, going, God, where are you? In this pit that I'm in the place that I'm in? To get me through it all, I let my guard down, and then you pulled the rug. I was kind of getting used to being someone you loved. You see, we all find ourselves in that place of being weak. The thing that we thought was going to rescue us doesn't. It becomes that rug that's pulled out from under our feet. Every human being, doesn't matter where you've come from, how you walked in here, we've all had that happen. And the beauty of this psalm and the beauty of what David is saying here is that no matter where you've come from, no matter what rug's been pulled out, no matter how weak you feel, God doesn't just use and leverage your weakness. Because that's what he says to the apostle. The apostle Paul says this. 2 Corinthians, he's talking to him and he's saying, I've got this thorn in the flesh. I've been asking for it to be removed. Time and time again, I've been begging God, saying, hey, I'll be better at what you've asked me to do if you just take this thorn out. Don't know if it's a physical problem, a struggle or a temptation. We don't know. But God's response in this is pretty powerful. He says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. The Apostle Paul knew that his weakness, his story of being a murderer and a Pharisee, would be the thing that he would leverage to lead people to Jesus. His most embarrassing, his most tragic moments were the things that made people know and realize God must be real if they save this man. And David knew that about himself. He knew that his brokenness, and in his brokenness, it was just crazy that God would pick or choose him in his weakness. He didn't just use his weakness, he chose it. He can use your failures. He can use your insecurities. He can use your situation and your circumstance. The things that have all gone wrong. It's never too far gone in the economy of God. Just look at the cross of Jesus Christ. Everything was as far as it can possibly get in terms of disaster. But out of the ashes, out of the grave, resurrection. God can do anything. So I don't know where you've come or where you're sitting in the hope meter today, but this gives me hope. I need this. I've got a million voices coming at me at 90 miles an hour telling me what kind of pill I need to take, what kind of exercise program I need to engage in, the things that I need to do. And I've got one singular voice right here that's telling me no matter what I deal with, there's a God that is bigger. And not only that he can take the weakest thing, the most broken thing, the most tragic thing in my life, and he can leverage it for good. He can redeem it for my good and for his glory. It's one of the most powerful things I think about the economy of God. Track number 3, pale blue dot. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for him? So now we put it all together, this juxtaposition of a great, massive God that breathes out the stars and little old me that he cares about. It's interesting when you look at the photograph. I don't know if any of you know that there's a photograph called the pale blue dot. You can't even see it in this one. This is the original photograph that was taken by the Voyager in 1990. That's 3.7 billion miles from the sun, which is crazy. And you can see it. It's just a speck, a pale blue dot suspended on a sunbeam. That's what Carl Sagan said about it in his book. He was an astrophysicist and an astronomer, famous back in his day. And he would say this about planet Earth. He says, look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. And on it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy, suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, economic doctrines, every hunter, forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilizations, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. And he says this in almost in wondering, how did we get here? And why are we here? And where are we going? He wants to know. He's curious about this is crazy. Once we started to discover just how big the universe was, you've got a man that's like, it is incredible that there's this pale blue dot suspended on a sunbeam that would be, from the naked eye, from anywhere else in the universe, would be lost. We wouldn't even notice it. It would be unnoticeable. But yet, God, in his economy, he doesn't just notice us. Look at this. Isaiah 43:1 says, "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you." You specifically, I've summoned you what? By name. You are mine. He doesn't just know your name. He wants to say you're mine. The thing that we need most. John 10:3 says he calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. God says, you're nothing compared to me. But when you look at the cross of Jesus Christ, he's amplifying that you mean everything to me. You see, everything that Psalm 8 is about is leading to this unbelievable truth that we all need and we're pining for, which is being unconditionally loved. God is clear that he doesn't need you, because if he needed you, then his love would be conditional. He's made it very obvious. The pale blue dot, the fact that he's created everything, breathed everything out into existence, the sun, the moon, the stars, everything that he's put in place. If he needed us, then his love would be conditional. But he's saying, I don't need you, but I want you. You know, I recently was watching a movie I've seen several times, which is Friday Night Lights. Anybody seen the movie Friday Night Lights? Some of you have seen the show. The movie is awesome. The movie's actually a true story that happened in, I think, 1988. And Billy Bob Thornton plays the coach, and country singer Tim McGraw. Yeah, he plays Donnie Billingsley's dad, and he's a dirtbag. Like, he's just terrible. He's drunk. He won a state championship. You know, he wishes he could be on the horse, you know, doing the thing, but, you know, he's not a good dad. And it's cringeworthy to watch because he mistreats him, he abuses him, and all of it is about, you can't do the thing that I want you to do. I want you to win a state championship. I want you to have a ring like I've got. I want you to do it like I did it, but you can't even catch the ball. And he's on him the whole thing, gets hammered, and you can tell his desire is that he could do it. He wants him to. He wants him to win a state championship. He wants him to be a better football player. Somewhere in there, you're just praying there's a better dad than what you see on film. And I never really watched that. You just think about that movie as a football movie. That's a football movie about the Texas State Championship in 1988. It's a movie about a father and a son. It's a movie about love, and it's about conditional love, right? But what's amazing at the end of the movie, somehow, some way, this team that shouldn't have made it because of injury, because of a lot of things, because they were playing one of the craziest, amazing teams of all time in high school football, they ended up in the finals of the Texas State Championship, and they were getting their brains beat out, and then they almost won it. But they lost it. They lost the championship. And then you see the father walking across to Donnie, his son, who he's abused his whole life. He's walking over to him across the thing. And based on what had happened in the entire movie, you're thinking he's getting ready to say something awful to him, but you're thinking maybe, just maybe, you know, there's something that's changed. So he walks over there and he wraps his arm around his son, pulls his son's head in tight, and you can tell he's whispering something, and I'm thinking, is this going to end poorly, or you know, how's this going to go? Because it's a true story. And he says something to him, and then you know what he says to him at that point. Like, it's got it, because he grabs the ring that he cherished, the state championship ring that he got back in whenever, the glory days, and he puts it on his son's finger. Almost to say, even though you lost, and I'm thinking, what changed? Like, for me, I'm always weird. I'm like, see, there's a story. I want to know. There's no way he just all of a sudden became a better human. And just made for a good movie, right? How can he go from being so conditionally loving to completely unconditional? I love you because you're my son. I love you. And not only that, even though you lost, you win because I won. And I just thought, man, how this movie's flipped, because you had a horrible father, and now you've got a completely different picture of a father. And I don't know how you grew up or what your story is or how you experience life with your earthly father or your earthly dad or your earthly parent or your brother or your sister or whoever it was. But the beautiful thing about who Jesus is Jesus made the only way that we can have and experience the one thing that we were created for, which is unconditional love, is through Jesus. He is the one that made a way for us to be loved that way by our Heavenly Father. In fact, God loved us so much and wanted to be back in relationship with us so much that He sent His one and only Son to die on a cross, to bleed out, to pave a way so that we could be in relationship with the Creator and the King of the universe, that we could boldly approach the throne of grace. He's made a way for us to be with the star breather, to be able to look up at night and confidently and say, my dad is bigger than anything that I will ever face on planet Earth. Jesus made a way. And He's here in the room and He's available. You can give your life to Him. I don't know where you are. Maybe you're just in church and a church person and you've never been felt like you've been in a relationship with Jesus. Well, Jesus is here and He's beckoning you home. He's beckoning you home. And it's a love with no condition.